Hello and welcome to NewsClick. Today we have with us Professor Aijaz Ahmad to discuss the situation that is developing in Tunisia, partly with the new developments that have taken place, partly what its impact is going to be in the larger frame of West Asia, Arab countries, the Maghreb and so on. Aijaz, Tunisian developments seem to be moving quite rapidly, but one part is very clear. The old regime is not being accepted by the people anymore, and President Ben Ali's being thrown out is continuing with his successors who were a part of his establishment earlier, also being not accepted by the people. How do you read the situation?
Well, I think that's an interesting thing. I was thinking about the word regime before we started talking, and the way I thought about it is that the dictatorship is gone, but the regime still is there, tottering, hopefully on its last legs. This is the last card that the old regime is playing, which is the trying to keep the government under the control of the RCD, the ruling party, the what's it called, the Constitutional Democratic Rally, right, of the RCD. Actually, most of the organized forces had accepted this formula. There are different kinds of arguments being put forth by the opposition parties which have joined the government. The biggest one being that the most important thing to do right now is to restore stability, law and order, ensure fresh elections, and have a competent government. One of the leaders of the opposition said that because of the dictatorship and because of the kind of political setup Tunisia has always had, all the competent people are in the ruling party, and therefore we cannot break from the ruling party. All the people who can actually run a government are in the political, are there. But under mass pressure, actually, the unions have taken now a very, very strong stand. The 4 ministers from the party that is aligned with the unions, UGCT, the General Union of Tunisian Workers, the party that was aligned with the UGTT, have resigned. 3 of them have resigned. One of them has suspended himself, who is the chairman of the party, Secretary General of the party. And the union has now taken a very strong stand that we will not sit in the same room with people who have been ministers. And so that is the next test, whether or not they'll do that. Important in this is what needs to be watched is the role of the Tunisian army. Tunisian army clearly differentiated itself from the police of the Interior Ministry, which was very much under the control of the dictatorship, and refused to, not only refused to fire on the protesters, but even protected them in very many places, and arrested very many of the police officers who had carried out many of the firings. Tunisian army is a very small, compact, professional army. It has never had a political role. That is one thing the previous president, President Bourguiba, the late president, made sure that the army was kept completely out of politics, because that is what he witnessed in Libya and Egypt and Syria and so on. So now, will they step in? We don't know. The kind of actions that they have taken have made them quite popular. They facilitated the departure of Ben Ali. That much they did. Their refusal to fire on the masses forced the resignation, then they facilitated his departure. So right now they are very popular. If they were to take over, we don't know. Very many of the protesters might actually retreat if they were to come in and say, this political dispute is not getting, and there is chaos and this, that, and the other. We are coming in and we will hold elections within 90 days or some such thing. That might be the end of the protests. So we don't know.
Effectively, the army is the only other institution,
That
apart
is
from the
right.
RCD,
Right.
which has a cohesive institutional framework.
That's right. That's right.
the
And
other
now,
part.
now you see the crisis of the RCD has reached a point where the Prime Minister and the President, both of them who were illustrious members of the RCD and very close allies of Zainul Abidin bin Ali, the departed president, they have both resigned from the party. And more resignations of high-profile members are in order, so that the party is crumbling in that way.
Other part could be that you distance yourself officially or formally from the party,
Right.
but you still maintain
continue.
the frame.
Yeah,
So in that sense, this is yet to be seen what's really happening.
Now you see, something else that needs to be said about the RCD is that it is a party that has a membership of 2 million people out of 10 million.
So every family had a member.
You had to be a member in order to get, admissions in a college or whatever. At the same time, it is not a proper political party, in the sense that there was no politics left for the last 23 years that Zainul Abidin certainly was president. And under Bourguiba, Bourguiba was a very repressive president himself. Socially very progressive in great many ways, but very repressive one. So it has been a long time since Tunisia has had a politics.
A political process of any kind.
So that the cabinets, one after another, were packed with technocrats. They're not members of they're not politicians in the sense in which we understand politicians. So there is an argument that, look, these were technocrats who were picked up to be cabinet ministers, so why not work with them?
Do you think that this political process which is unfolding, and it's been in that sense mass politics, which is what distinguishes from the earlier kind of formations that existed in Tunisia, the first time you really have mass protests on this scale, which has led to a change, at least in the form of the regime, if not the content that we have yet to see. Do you think that this mass politics will bring in the left forces, the Islamist forces, which both are actually or have been there, into more active play?
About the protest, let me say that Tunisia has had a recent history of protests, and repeated ones. The last ones were in 2008. What happened with these protests is, or rather the pattern of protests in Tunisia has been that they are mostly in the south and in the coastal regions, the poorer regions of Tunisia. This time, for the first time, they came into Tunis. They did not start in the capital. They started in the historic homelands of protest. But they came into Tunis this time. And that is where they became a mass protest. Otherwise, these were congregations of 300 people here and 500 people there and so on, and all that. So that is what is new, that the city has risen. Who has risen in the city? To start with, the professional classes. Educated, unemployed. Tunisia is a highly educated society, much more educated than any other Arab country, with a very fine education system. So it's a very sophisticated, educated class. And yet, unemployment is running about 25% or something for college graduates. They were on the streets. Professionals were on the streets. Lawyers. If you want to identify the main players in this, organized ones, these are the union, UGTT, and the lawyers, including the Bar Association. There was general strike of the Tunisian Bar Association. Some 95% of the lawyers came out in the street, and in fact, they threw in their lot with the protesters very early. So it's an uprising of the educated professional classes. The working class en masse came in much later. But now they are the ones who are dominating the protests. Because in the professional classes, there is a division now. Part of the professional classes are saying, well, look, stability is very important so long as we get elections in 60 days or something, etc., etc. The other part of the professional classes were not. The question that you were posing about the left of the Islamicists, Tunisia has had a very, very powerful trade union movement that has always been the heart of the left. It has been much more advanced than left-wing political parties. But it was in its heyday of the 60s and the 70s one of the world's great trade union movements. Very closely aligned, during that history, very closely aligned with the French CGT and so on. That institution is not now what it used to be in 70s, 80s, but that is one civil institution that exists. And exists to a very considerable degree. It's a significant institution in Tunisian society. There was a very strong left movement, not a very strong communist party. There's been a communist party, but there has been a very... And by and large, Tunisian intelligentsia tends to be left of center.
Secular left of
secular
center
left of center, very much like the French Socialist Party. Secular left of center, without the imperial problems of the French Socialist Party. But so it's an enlightened, secular, very well educated left of center intelligence. It has had no organizational form recently. Very strong cultural intelligentsia in film, in literature, and things like that. That is what the left is, the trade union movement plus this. All its organizational forms were suppressed and co-opted by the new Dastur, which was Bourguiba's party, which transformed itself into the RCD. But in its fragmented form, in whatever form, that left exists. Some of it has become very high human rights oriented secular intelligentsia. Some of the high profile people are people who used to be very much on the left, who still have left leanings, but who are much more now into the democratic movement, human rights, this, that.
Rights platforms.
Right. Look, Tunisia is a country where in both houses of parliament, there are 20% or more women. It's socially a very progressive society. There's all of that. There was an organized Islamicist movement, and one of the few achievements of President Ben Ali, Zainul Abidin Ben Ali, who has just left, was to suppress that very successfully.
And Nahad formation.
Yes. Now, they will come back. There is a political vacuum in which all these forces will contend, and none of them have been, other than the UGTT, other than the union, none of them have had a powerful organizational form in recent years. So there's going to be a free-for-all among these. Now, the drawback in all of this is this. The army and the UGTT are the only stable institution. The third one was the RCD, which is about to collapse. Committees are arising across Tunisia, but things moved so fast that they have not had the time to gel. Neighborhood committees and various sorts of committees which could become the sort of
nucleus centers.
For, you see, what would have been best in Tunisia, which I'm not very sure can happen, it may, is for another force to emerge which becomes the dominant force in a transitional form of some sort of transitional assembly, which may include these other people, including parts of the RCD or something, but which is then dominated by, this other kind of force, which then creates a constituent assembly, which then holds the next elections and so on. That's the only guarantee that there would be free and fair elections and the RCD types won't come back. Now, whether that will happen or not, we don't know. Things are moving very fast.
Thanks, Aijaz. We'll come back in the next section on the question of what its impact is going to be on the larger Arab scenario, as well as what its impact is likely to be in Africa, because we have other instances of similar uprisings or unhappiness with the current regimes there too. So we'll come back on the next part with this discussion. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Yes.